Welcome to another Fantasy Goodfellas video where we talk about the top 30 running back rankings for week 6. You ready?
The Fantasy Goodfellas.
Boom, boom, boom. Rolling on the field.
The Fantasy Goodfellas.
All right, before we get started, I just want to explain a little bit about this video. When it comes to rankings, we know that most of you are going to start your own running backs anyways, regardless of these rankings. Now, the only thing that this video will probably do is just kind of give you an example of how they're trending and maybe a couple questions of who you should start versus the matchups if you had a couple different questions. But we know, hey, sometimes your lineup's thin in running backs. You're going to have to start the guys regardless of they're trending or not, and we understand that. But before we get started, I just want to show you a little bit about how and who came in the top 30 last week. Now, if you look here, this is last week's rankings. You had Travis Etienne as the best running back, Zach Moss, and Bree Hall. Those three running backs right there were maybe not expected to be the top three. Then you had some Montgomery. You had a few other, look, number 8, McLaughlin, A.J. Dillon kind of stood up. And here you got Spears came in higher than Derrick Henry, kind of surprising. Craig Reynolds, Dame Ricardo, and just a couple surprises there. So this is always good if you want to see who's trending. But now we're going to go ahead and get started on this week's rankings, and let's just get started. At number 1, we have Christian McCaffrey at the Cleveland Browns. Now, this is going to be an interesting lineup because Cleveland Browns defense has been really well, and now all of a sudden you have a rolling San Francisco offense. But the question I have is, where's that ball going to go to? Unfortunately, you only have so many passes you can throw, and you got only so many attempts at rush. So, look, how many people would think that Jordan Mason would get 69 yards and a rushing TD? That's kind of surprising, but it's Cleveland. Cleveland's been strong against the run. It's going to be an interesting matchup. At number 2, we have Kyren Williams versus the Arizona Cardinals. And I think, again, this is a stretch. I mean, here he goes in week 5. He was the 31st ranked running back. So he didn't cut it in week 5. Now all of a sudden you're going to move him all the way up to the second best running back. I doubt that that's going to happen. I don't expect him to be this high in the rankings. At number 3, David Montgomery at the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. So David Montgomery had a 3 TD week 2 weeks ago. Now he has 109 rushing yards and a rushing TD. Here he goes as the 3 TD week. He's getting some usage. I just doubt that he's going to be this high again. Not saying he can't be in the top 30, but this is a little bit of a stretch for him. At number 4, Josh Jacobs versus the New England Patriots. Unfortunately, the New England Patriots suck. So can Josh Jacobs be the 7th ranked running back? Absolutely. That defense is horrible, and the offense is even worse. So I expect Josh Jacobs to do very well versus the New England Patriots, surprisingly, right? At number 5, you got Tony Pollard at the Los Angeles Chargers. Now, do I expect Tony Pollard to get a lot more than 8 attempts that he had in week 5? And the reason why is Dak Prescott's not really playing too well, right? There's a little doubt. His confidence must have taken a hit a little bit. So now do you expect him to sling it? No. I think they're going to have a game plan that's going to be more about rushing just to take off that pressure on Dak Prescott. So that's what I expect to happen. I expect Tony Pollard to have a good game. At number 6, Austin Eckler versus the Dallas Cowboys. Austin Eckler, he's been banged up a little bit. So now all of a sudden you're going to bring him back. He's been dealing with injuries. Now you're going to bring him back, and you're going to expect him to be the 6th best running back in week 6? I doubt it. And that Dallas defense has been good, so I doubt Austin Eckler would be this high. Number 7, Bijan Robinson, home versus the Washington Commanders. And how did he do? He's kind of having that rookie type season, right? What's that mean? He's getting a lot of usage early on, but he'll disappear some games. And I think that's why I like to look at the week-to-week rankings to see how he comes in. He was the top 10. He was the top 10 running back the first 2 weeks, dropped off. Then he was in the mid-tier running back. And so it really depends on what's going on. I expect him to be about 19, between 13 and 19 for week 6. At number 8, you got Kenneth Walker III at the Cincinnati Bengals. Kenneth Walker, he's kind of having one of those seasons. He can kind of get the touches, but he's getting touchdowns. Look, 2 TD games he had 2 TD games, and points-wise, he's been over 13 points 3 of 4 weeks. So I think he can do fairly well. It's just the Bengals, if that offense is clicking and marching down, they're going to take that time of possession. I think that's a little high for Kenneth Walker. At number 9, Derrick Henry, home versus the Baltimore Ravens. Now you got Henry and you got Spears. Spears is doing well, right? And now all of a sudden Derrick Henry had a quiet game, but DeAndre Hopkins exploded. So what to expect? This is a running team. I expect Derrick Henry to do well, but they're trying to find more ways to get the ball in Spears' hands. But I expect Derrick Henry to do well. They're just going against that Baltimore Ravens defense. At number 10, Travis Etienne versus the Indianapolis Colts. There was our number 1 running back for week 5. And how did he do that? 136 rushing yards, 2 TDs. That offense clicked again. If you're getting number 1 running back, it's going to take the pressure off of Trevor Lawrence. And what did Trevor Lawrence do with the number 1 running back? Well, he just threw for 315 yards and a touchdown. So if they can do that, they're balancing themselves out, and that's looking really well. At number 11, Alvin Kamara at the Houston Texans. Now, before we move on and see his stats, I like to look, where was Alvin Kamara in the top 30? He wasn't. And then, that's what we have, these name brands. I like to call them name brands. They're always going to put in the top 30. Oh, he was. He was the 6th. He was the 6th best. My bad. But so if he was the 6th best going against the Texans, he should do fairly well again. But what was his stats? Well, he just had 80 rushing yards. Look at those attempts, though. 22 attempts. That's unbelievable. I don't expect him to get 22 attempts, but if you're trying to get him the ball that many times, he's going to get the stats, right? At number 12, you got Isaiah Pacheco versus the Denver Broncos. Now, hey, listen, we know Denver sucks on defense. The question is where does that ball go, right? Pacheco can be a top-ranked running back, no problem. They just got too many weapons, right? Look at this. Patrick Mahomes threw for 41 times. He threw to 7 different wide receivers, 2 different tight ends, and 2 different running backs. If you're spreading the ball out that much, you are not going to get the touches you need to excel. So I'm nervous about Pacheco. I'd like to see him drop. Before we move on, where was he ranked? He was the 13th ranked running back. I expect him to be right in there as well next week. At number 13, DeAndre Swift. Look at this. I got to update that. What the heck? We have a little error here. But anyways, DeAndre Swift. Where is he here? What did he do in week 5? Well, he had 70 rushing yards and 38 receiving yards. And that is for 17, ranked 17th. And how did that offense do as a whole? Well, Jalen Hurts was kicking kicking some butt. A.J. Brown was the biggest recipient. But, again, it's Philadelphia. They're rolling. You just got too many weapons there. At number 14, Joe Mixon versus the Seattle Seahawks. Now, sometimes we always don't have a chance to see these receivers and what they're doing, right? So that's what we're trying to figure out is what I do is show you some stats and show you what he's working on. And here, I like to see what he's doing on the season. So it looks like for Mixon, he's getting more rushing yards each and every week. So if this trend continues, he should be over 85 yards. TDs-wise, not getting into the end zone. But it looks just like that Cincinnati Bengals offense is warming up. They're starting to spread the ball out. If they're getting into the hands of their wide receivers and Jamar Chase, well, that opens up a lot of things for Joe Mixon to pop one. And so I expect that to kind of happen. At number 15, James Conner at the Los Angeles Rams. Now, Conner, it's the Joshua Dobbs show, and Conner, questionable of how he's going to do this season, but he can break it over 100. It's just, is he going to get into the end zone, and can he get some fantasy points? We'll see. Going against the Los Angeles Rams might be a little shootout, so they're going to have to play catch up a little bit. Number 16, Raheem Mostert versus the Carolina Panthers. Now, there's Agon might be injured, so if Mostert gets the majority of the carries, he's going to be a top running back. But it's just so pay attention. If Devon Aoun is not running and playing, then you expect Mostert to do really well because he's going to have more than 10 attempts. At number 17, you got Saquon Barkley at the Buffalo Bills. Buffalo Bills, they can do well. Looks like Barkley did not play in Week 5, in Week 4, in Week 3, Week 2. Looks like he's been banged up a little bit. So I guess they're expecting him to play in Week 6. But you're coming off an injury. It's going to be tough for Saquon Barkley against the Buffalo Bills. I doubt that he'll be ranked this high. So pay attention to that. At number 18, Bree Hall versus the Philadelphia Eagles. Now, Bree Hall kind of questioned that offense, and it looks like that offense is just getting better. But boy, Bree Hall, man, he can take off. He's a sprinter. He's got some speed. That 177 rushing yards and 1 TD. They just need to keep feeding him the ball, find ways to get him the ball. I like Bree Hall. He should do really well. But he was the third best running back in Week 5. He was the third best running back. I think he should do well next week as well. But again, it is against Philadelphia. So maybe he's in the top 30, just not 18. At number 19, Devon Aoun versus the Carolina Panthers. Now, he might not play. I think these rankings are done early. But if I know some people have both Miami Dolphin running backs, they're performing. There's going to be some down weeks. I just can't see how both running backs are constantly going to be ranked so high. In the top 20, I doubt it. They're going to have a little step back a little bit. I don't think that he's going to be ranked that high this week. Number 20, you got James Cook versus the New York Giants. Now, Dolphins lit up the Giants. So is this the chance for James Cook to do well? I think so. And I think that's where you can kind of see. I think Cook can kind of get 100 yards. I think he can be ranked a little bit higher than he is because he's going against that New York Giants defense. At number 21, Alexander Madison versus the Chicago Bears. Now, again, rookie running back. What do you expect with rookie running backs? Well, you're going to have good weeks and you're going to have bad weeks. How many bad weeks is he going to have? I think that's the question that you got to figure out, right? You got, but look, he's doing well. And he's consistently either scoring or getting the yards. In week 5, he had 26 rushing yards and 20 receiving yards with a TD. So what I want to do is, before I look, I want to see his TD ratio. So that's what's doing it for him, right? So if we look at him week to week, he's got to be getting a touchdown. He got a touchdown in week 1, got a touchdown in week 5. In 3 and 4, he got the yardage. So I think he can do well again. It is Minnesota. At number 22, Brian Robinson Jr. at the Atlanta Falcons. Brian Robinson did not do that much for fantasy owners in week 5. A little disappointing. What should we expect? Well, with Brian Robinson, you should expect a little bit more than that. He is your number 1 running back there. I think he should have a bounce-back game. I'd expect him to be more like week 1 in yardage than week 2. So if we look at her touchdowns, that's what he's scored. He's done fairly well in scoring fantasy points, which means yardage and touchdowns. And that's what we got with Brian Robinson. At number 23, Randa Stevenson at the Las Vegas Raiders. And I don't know, that New England offense is falling apart. I don't know why you're putting anybody in New England in the top 30. Don't expect it to happen, because you don't even know who your quarterback might be. It might be Zappy. And if it's Zappy, I think that offense is in disarray. So how do you put a running back in your top 30? I think it's asinine. At number 24, you got Damien Pierce, home versus the New Orleans Saints. And again, how did Damien Pierce do? Well, he was the 24th best running back in week 5. He did that with 66 rushing yards and 16 receiving yards. At number 25, you got Rashad White versus the Detroit Lions. Now, Rashad White, he has the talent. He can do good. It's just, where's that ball going? I don't think you have an entire offense that's going to do really well. But in week 4, he did about 78 total yards. It's the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. It seems to be slow and methodical for them, right? It just doesn't seem to be like one of those stellar offenses. But he could do fairly well. 25, he's in the top 30. I like it. At number 26, Myles Sanders at the Miami Dolphins. Now, Myles Sanders, again, in week 5, he had 32 rushing yards. Now, all of a sudden, you're going against Miami's defense, which Miami can run. And if they run, they're eating up the clock. And I don't think you're going to get enough touches to keep up with Miami. So I think this is a little high to see Myles Sanders ranked 26. At 27, Jerome Ford versus the San Francisco 49ers. Well, kind of like this matchup, right? You got the San Francisco 49ers have a stellar defense. Now you have a questionable offense, but they like to run. I doubt that Jerome Ford's going to do so well. So this seems to be a stretch. But again, all it takes is it takes a little bit of receiving, a little bit of rushing, and a touchdown. Can he do it? I think he can squeeze in to the top 30. At number 28, Jonathan Taylor at the Jacksonville Jaguars. With Jonathan Taylor coming back, that's what it looked like. Look at this. Zach Moss was the dominant running back for that offense. Look at this. 165 rushing yards with 2 TDs. Now you got Jonathan Taylor back, and in your top 30, there's no Zach Moss. So how is this possible? I don't like it. I think that's a stretch. At 29, Gus Edwards at the Tennessee Titans. Again, it's just when you're going against the Titans, they like to run a lot. They got 2 running backs getting some usage, getting some carries. I think Gus Edwards is going to have a tough time, and he's going to be limited to yardage. And if he's doing 4 yards a carry, he's going to be outside the top 30 again. At number 30, Deontay Foreman at the Miami Dolphins. Now, here you go. You got two running backs going against the Miami Dolphins who has an amazing offense, who can run, and now it seems a little questionable. I got to make sure. Going to make sure he's still with the Miami Dolphins and the Carolina Panthers. Might have to check that stat a little bit. All right, when I do these stats, I like looking at the stats. This is my own graphics machine that I like to showcase and show things every now and then when I'm doing these videos and these stats. I might have a little arrow on my graphics machine. But that is the top 30 running backs for Week 6. I hope I showed you some trends, showed you some graphs to see how your running backs are performing. If you have any questions, please put it in the comment section. Otherwise, don't forget to like and subscribe. And good luck, fantasy owners.
Those fantasy good fellas.
Boom, boom, boom. Rolling on the field.
Those fantasy good fellas.